to Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we are broadcasting live on April 1st from the studios of WMNF in Tampa. Later on in the show, we're going to hear a debate in the Florida legislature about a bill to lower the age to purchase rifles to the age of 18. So I hope you stay tuned for that. But first up, on Saturday, there was a protest at a Tesla dealership in Tampa, and you can hear WMNF's Josh Holton's reporting on it at WMNF.org. And joining me right now to talk about why those people were protesting is one of the demonstrators, Dave Coleman. So welcome to WMNF's Tuesday Cafe, Dave.
Thanks for having me here, Sean.
I'm really glad you could join us. So tell us about this demonstration. Where was it, and why were people like you protesting?
On North Florida Avenue, there's a large Tesla dealership that had been mostly vacant for I live just up the street from there, and it's been vacant really for a lot of years. Lately, there's been more activity there. But I've been wondering when, because of Doge and Elon and his dismantling of our government before our eyes, that there would be finally a protest there. And I saw an impromptu flyer. It wasn't an event page, and there was no named organizer. So that immediately makes it a little bit of a skepticism for me, because I've been to a number of protests, and I'd really like to go to ones that have marshals and legal observers, but I'm assuming that it's going to be okay. It was close to home. If it went bad, I could leave. But I showed up. I began to photograph some stills, and then I turned on my live. We got there at about 11 o'clock, which was about when it was supposed to start. We were able to park real close. And who else was showing up there? I just gave some of my reasons why I showed up, but it was mostly elders, a lot of retired people. I saw veterans there. There were elderly women. There was one 90-year-old in a walker. That was on my side of the street, which was on the west side of North Florida Avenue, the dealership being across the street. There were several protesters out there by 11 o'clock, and then there was a small one or two American flags on the south side, on the east side. And that grew to about 8 people that were the opposition. They had a large poles and Trump flags and whatnot. There were 2 bloggers that showed up on the other side. There was Adam Francisco and also Caitlin Bennett. They're local bloggers. I'll go into that a little bit more later if you have time for it. But we were people that are deeply concerned about our country, been voters all along. In the crowd and in subsequent videos, I saw a lot of my friends from the North Tampa Democratic Party. I saw, it was a variety of people. Some young people did show up at the event, so that's who was there.
And this protest at Tesla dealerships is part of a national movement protesting the connection between Tesla and Elon Musk.
Yes, absolutely. It was a national, it was called as a national thing, but this was a local event. And as I said, there was a table set up when we got there. There was a sign-up sheet with a couple names on it. There was a box of chalk there and some buttons that they had made up that they were giving out. And I met a woman standing next to the table. I said that you organized. She said she didn't want to take credit for it, but several people did, she said. But it got posted on pages that I'm familiar with, so it got some airtime, and a lot of people showed up. By the time we left, there was at least 150 people there, and about 8 of the opposition on the other side.
And during the protests, tensions flared. What caused all of that?
I started that video pretty early on, and by 11:15, I turned to my left and I saw this man coming, and he was surrounded by allies, and one particular woman was screaming, and it was the woman I met at the table. She said, "What are you doing here? What is that lighter for? Give me the lighter. What do you have in your backpack?" But other people were saying he already said he has fireworks and smoke bombs, and he was holding a barbecue lighter in his right hand. By the time they got right in front, well, I just was standing there, and they got right in front of me. She reached for the lighter. It was very nefarious looking. I'm wondering what in the world is going on here. And I did say to her, don't touch him, that could set something off. And all she did was touch his hand lightly, just to go for that lighter. And instantly, apparently this guy, his name is Clifford Jordan, we found out by the next day, is a previous MMA coach, retired. This guy, within seconds, forearms the woman, knocking her back, and then had his hand up under her arms, grabbing her throat. At this point, her husband, turns out to be, jumped in on his back and did punch him a couple of times to get him away from his wife. His wife stepped back, but then she joined the melee, and they tussled for a while, and then they began to break up. And this Clifford Jordan is screaming for his mask back, which he had worn into the place. So he's unmasked at this point. I'm still filming. And he's saying, where's the guy that punched me? And I want my mask back. And then a fourth person interjected himself. A fellow that was standing nearby walked over to pick up a bag. There were two bags on the ground. He picked up somebody else's bag. He picked up the 90-year-old's. It turns out it had a sun hat and prunes in it. And so that's what he left with. So he couldn't have done any more damage if he wanted to. But he milled around for a while, refusing to leave, and left slowly. Then I noticed to my left that the police had shown up. There were two cars that drove past us. They parked in the auto zone next door, and then they started. One officer walked into the site. So I walked over and I said, I have all of this on my live stream. Do you want it? She refuses. She had told me she doesn't want to press any charges. This fella is walking past us as I'm talking to this Hillsborough County Sheriff's officer. This fellow was walking past us. He had grabbed a piece of chalk off the table, and he's writing stuff on the sidewalk in front of the cop. And I go, there he is. And the officer had no interest whatsoever in interviewing him, asking him, seeing what was in his pack. I had no idea that the packs were switched at that point. And then later on this blog with this Adam Francisco, 2 minutes into the interview, he said, I had every intention of lighting off those fireworks. I was going to walk myself a short distance away, and I was going to set off fireworks and make a loud noise. That is his own words. He mocked the 90-year-old. He accused us of stealing his bag, but I found in video clearly where the two bags were and how the person who went to grab the bag grabbed the wrong one. And it had gotten left there. And then somebody else, I left around noon, somebody else put in, I don't know who it was exactly, put up on Facebook video of the cop standing in front of the bag on the ground, and one of the protesters walked over and said, I'll open the bag and see what's in it. We think it's his. And they opened it, and sure enough, it was filled with fireworks. And at that point, the officer picked it up and took it right away from them. But there has been no repercussions to this Clifford Jordan, retired MMA fighter, coach that lives up in Land O'Lakes. So that's my story about the disruption, and quite alarming given the age and status of the people that were in this protest, all jammed on a sidewalk at that point.
Well, that's the voice of Dave Coleman, who was one of the demonstrators on Saturday at a Tesla dealership in Tampa. And we're talking about the videos he took of a confrontation that happened there between what seems to be maybe someone who was trying to be an agent provocateur. So this is a Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and you're listening to WMNF Tampa. So where can people see videos that you took of this confrontation and of this demonstration?
There's a page called Indivisible Tampa Bay. I put a bunch of it up, my stuff up there. And then this Adam Francisco, this fellow Clifford Jordan got 360,000 views. I think that he was not only a provocateur, but he just wanted his moment of fame to go in and do that. But how would we know that as he's walking through carrying this lighter? So on Adam's page, you can see he was right behind me through this event, filming the whole thing. How he got there in a timely manner, I don't know. On his blog, he says, I wore a red hat to a Tesla protest.
So are there other plans for other demonstrations coming up in Tampa that you know about?
I know of one on this Saturday at City Hall. It'll be like the fifth one of 51 protests that have been going on. They're usually on Tuesdays at 3 o'clock. This particular one is going to be on Saturday at City Hall, Tampa. Last time we had at least 800 people, maybe more. Some people were saying 1,000 on a Tuesday. I'm expecting a large crowd for that. And again, there is people from all walks of life, elders, young people. It's a very peaceful event. There's been no disruption. And I'll say this about Tampa Police Department. They are there. They're on site. They're monitoring. Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office was atrocious. They don't care about the safety of its citizens. At Tampa, they're within earshot. Well, the police station's right across the street from the City Hall. But even regardless that, in all the protests I've been in Tampa, they have bicycle cops that are within earshot. They are monitoring people on film. You just know that. And when something happens, they're there in a moment. It's been my experience for the past 8 years that that's the truth. In Hillsborough County, they have a reputation of gassing and beating students at USF last year, let alone what they did just this Saturday. They did show up. They lied to another news person saying that they never got a call about this until 2 in the afternoon. Well, it's a fact that they were there. That officer was on the site by 11:35 in the morning on Saturday. So they can't even tell the truth to a news person calling them.
Well, Dave, is there anything else that you want to mention before I let you go?
That's about it. Save our country. If you're sitting there screaming at the TV, come out on Saturday and show the world that this isn't America. This isn't what we're about.
Well, I want to thank you very much for coming on Tuesday Cafe, Dave. Dave Coleman was one of the demonstrators at the anti-Elon Musk protest at a Tampa Tesla dealership that happened on Saturday. This is WMNF Tampa, Tuesday Cafe. We turn now to a bill that's ready for a vote by the full Florida House of Representatives. It would reverse Florida's law by allowing people aged 18 to 21 to purchase rifles and other long guns. So here's some background on this bill. After the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting, the Florida legislature passed, and then Governor Rick Scott signed a law that prohibited people from under 21 from buying rifles and other long guns. We're going to hear debate on the bill that passed the House last week that would reverse that law. This audio starts with an amendment that would undo that age change. The amendment was introduced by a Democrat, Robin Bartleman, but as you'll hear, that was voted down. This is Tuesday Cafe, broadcasting from WMNF Tampa.
Representative Bartleman, you're recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many of you know, I was a school board member when Marjory Stoneman Douglas occurred. I was there the night of the shooting. I was there at the hotel. I was at the funerals, and it has been a very long journey. Representative Hunchowski and Representative Daly were also there, so this is very personal for us. So if you get upset, you know why. In 2018, the families came to Tallahassee and asked for more than thoughts and prayers. And this body, along with the Senate and the governor, gave them more than thoughts and prayers. They passed the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Act, a bipartisan act, because all of the studies show that it makes sense to raise the purchase age to 21. As a matter of fact, individuals 18 to 20 are 3 times more likely to commit an act of violence. My amendment restores that commitment and reverts the age back to the age of 21 so we can continue to honor the promise to those families and honor what we promised to the citizens of Florida. And I'm asking you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Questions of the sponsor? Seeing none, are there amendments to the amendment?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a substitute amendment?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Members, we're in debate. Debate on the amendment. Representative Escalante, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say thank you to Representative Bartleman. It is incredibly frustrating to be back on this House floor talking about this issue again. I really wish that none of us have experienced what the students and families went through in Parkland or my families went through after Pulse in Orlando. It's so rare that you have bipartisan action on an issue like gun violence. And the fact that this legislative body, before I got here, championed those issues across the aisle to help prevent another mass shooting in Florida was something and is something to be proud of. And so pulling that back, not only is it just dangerous, but it is disrespectful to the lives that were lost and to the families and the students who came up here to push for this policy change in the first place. We should be proud of the progress that we have made and add to it, not go back in time. Please support Representative Bartleman's amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further debate. Representative Hunchofsky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Bartleman, I remember seeing you a few days after the shooting at one of the many rallies we had. I want to thank you for this amendment, recognizing that 21 is a better age for this requirement. I hear a lot when we talk about this discussion about the Constitution and our rights. And for anybody who has actually looked back in history, Governor Morris, for example, one of the founding fathers, didn't think people under the age of 21 had the necessary judgment for quite a few things. And actually, when we look back in those early days, people were called infants if they were under the age of 21. So to now talk about that age as if we just picked it up out of nowhere, it's actually rooted in our United States history and among the founding fathers of this country. So if you believe in the Constitution and your rights and the founding fathers, and you want to look at actual history, you will support this very good amendment that not only supports history, but also keeping our communities and our schools safe.
Representative Robinson F., you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I stand to just support Representative Bartleman with this amendment. As an educator working with our young people for the last 30 years, I understand that they're just too young to actually have that type of responsibility. As an educator also, I often say that when people know better, they do better. And we have been here time and time again with different events and different situations of gun violence that has really torn up communities. And I would think that we would have learned from that and not go back on what we've learned. Another thing about this amendment that Representative Bartleman stated is she's actually giving you data. I know a lot of times we stand here in this chamber and we talk about doing legislation, but following the data, proving what's proven, factual, to actually move forward. And if we do not accept this amendment, we're now negating that. We're not doing that because, as she has stated, the research shows that 21 is an appropriate age. So I thank you for bringing this amendment, and I'm going to hope that my colleagues that knows better, because like we said, when you know better, when you have the education and have the resources to tell you about better, you should do better. So I'm hoping that we'll do better and we would actually accept this amendment.
Further debate on the amendment. Seeing none, Representative Bartleman, you are recognized to close on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you're concerned about the Second Amendment, I respect that concern, but you don't have to worry, because the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that this age of 21, this minimum age of 21, is constitutional. Not only is it constitutional, they say we can even go farther than this, and we're not doing that. So this just happened. Somebody litigated this case. Now, some of you also may be thinking, oh, Democrats, they just want to take away our guns. I don't want to take away your guns. I want common sense gun laws. I am a concealed carry permit holder. I'm not going to take away your guns. But I want common sense laws that make sense and keep our community safe. I'm urging you to keep your promise to this state, keep your promise to the families in Parkland, and support this amendment. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Bartleman, having closed on her amendment, all those in favor say yay. Yay. Opposed, no? No. Show the amendment is not adopted. Read the next amendment.
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Show the bill rolled over to third reading. Representative Salzman, you are recognized for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the rules be waived and the bill be rolled over for third reading and placed on final passage.
Representative Salzman moves that the rules be waived and HB 759 be read a third time by title and placed on final passage. All in favor say yay. Yay. Opposed, no? Show the motion adopted. Read the bill a third time by title.
By Representative Salzman and Representative Soroy and others, House Bill 759, a bill to be entitled, an act relating to minimum age for firearm purchase or transfer.
Are there any amendments?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Members, we're going into structured debate on House Bill 759. Debate will be limited to 40 minutes per side and 10-minute increments. Total debate time not to exceed 80 minutes. Representative Gant, you are recognized to begin the debate, and the clerk will start the debate clock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Bracy Davis.
She's a Democrat.
Representative Bracy Davis, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in firm opposition of House Bill 759. This bill will repeal the age restrictions put in place after one of the darkest days in Florida's history, the tragedy at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. Let us not forget that those age restrictions were enacted to protect our students, our teachers, our communities. To roll them back now is not only reckless, it's dangerous. What this bill truly says to our communities is your safety is negotiable. What this bill tells the families who've lost loved ones to senseless gun violence, often at the hands of young people whose brains are still developing, is your grief is not our concern. It tells mothers mourning their sons, fathers burying their daughters, siblings lighting candles and holding signs with names that should be spoken in present tense, that we have chosen access over accountability, politics over people, and convenience over common sense. Communities of color will be among the hardest hit by this bill. In our neighborhoods, gun violence doesn't just make the headlines, it defines lives. Young people growing up in zip codes that are underfunded, over-policed, and underserved are already carrying trauma on their backs like backpacks. And now, some in this chamber would rather hand them a firearm than a future. That's not leadership. That's negligence. If we are serious about protecting our schools, our students, our streets, then we cannot afford to play games with policy. We should be investing in mental health support, conflict resolution, trauma-enforced care, and community safety, not flooding our neighborhoods with more guns. This is not a partisan issue, members. This is a matter of life and death. And every vote cast in favor of this bill is a vote that will echo in the cries of another grieving family. Our responsibility is to safeguard the future, not arm it. I leave you with the powerful African proverb: the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Let us be kind to the village that embraces our children, that protects our communities, and that chooses people over politics every single time. Thank you.
Well, that was Democratic Representative LaVon Bracy Davis. She opposes a bill that passed the Florida House last week. It would lower the minimum age to purchase a rifle or long gun to 18 in Florida. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan. We're broadcasting from the studios of WMNF Tampa. So we're going to hear more of this debate, and it starts here with a Democrat from Tampa, Fentress Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Leader Driscoll.
Leader Driscoll, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd just like to talk about this from the legal perspective, because the law to raise the age to 21 was under consideration by the federal court. And just a week or two ago, the United States Court for the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals confirmed what we already knew, which is that it is constitutional to have this restriction and to have this age limit or the age floor set at 21. The court made it clear that this restriction is entirely reasonable and consistent with our nation's long history and tradition of firearm regulation, and in fact, it is integral to public safety. There is no legal reason to reverse course today. Let me say that again. There is no legal reason to reverse course today. In fact, the court said that we could have gone further because when they analyzed the history and tradition of regulating firearm access by children, the court noted we could have been more restrictive. And in fact, there are other states that have been even more restrictive than Florida. And I think there's no restriction that goes too far, frankly, if it comes to protecting our kids. But we weren't, because the MSD legislation was a bipartisan compromise to keep our children safe. And it was never about taking away guns or taking any action inconsistent with our constitutional rights. I'll also remind everyone, because we've talked about that being a bipartisan effort, and every Republican that voted in favor of that restriction in 2018 won re-election and came back to the House the next year. So I just want us to continue to think about that, because the court found that at the time of the founding of our country that people between 18 to 21 were considered children, and children are treated differently under the law because of their immaturity. And in any other context, I know I expect you, when you talk about that age group, to champion parents' rights and the sanctity of childhood and the need to keep children safe. But when it comes to this issue, the silence is deafening. And I think that we can do better. I invite us to do better. That's why I'll be voting down on this measure today and encourage everyone else to do the same. Thank you.
Representative Gann in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Antone.
Representative Antone in debate.
This is a Democrat.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just start out by saying I do not believe that the founders of our Constitution 249 years ago could foresee the types of guns that we would have today. M16, AK-47, MAC-10s, MAC-11s, I've shot all of those. One of my neighbors came back from Vietnam. He had a satchel full of guns, and he would take us out to shoot. My uncles taught me and my cousins how to shoot. And here's my main reason for being against people under the age of 21 having a gun. So my junior year in college, it was graduation Sunday, the last day that the dorms were open on campus. And this guy from Philadelphia, and I won't call his name, came into my room to steal. My girlfriend happened to be in the room. He scared her. Well, I came back to the room later, and he was down the hall breaking into one of my best friend's room. And so he and I got into a shouting altercation. I went in my room. I got my gun, which was a rifle. He took off running when I came out. I followed him out into the parking lot, into the field. And I shot near him. I didn't say I shot at him, but I shot near him. If I wanted to shoot him, I wouldn't have missed. And just so happened that this car pulled up into the parking lot, honking the horn. I got distracted. He got away. It was my dad coming to get me to pack up all my stuff to go home. And so as a 21-year-old, folks, I didn't need a gun, but it was something my dad had given me as a Christmas present because I'd asked for it. But I didn't need that gun, and just that quick, I snapped off, and I was about to kill someone, so my life could have changed. I would just say that 6 of the 10 deadliest mass shootings since 2018 have been committed by folks under the age of 21. Man, we just don't need folks with those guns, right? And no one under the age of 21 needs a gun for self-defense. I don't know what you're trying to defend yourself from if you got to have a long gun. Now, if your mom and dad want you to have a long gun, they can certainly go and buy you one, and they can gift it to you if they think you're responsible. But I'm just saying, people under the age of 21 do not need a gun. If you're a cop, a correctional officer, a military officer, in the military, you've been trained to be responsible. You've been trained to use how to use that gun. You know whether you should use a gun or not. But just to have any 18, 19, 20-year-old out there with a gun, I just think that's bad business, and I just think we should be opposed to that. So thank you for your time.
Representative Gann, debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to make a few points. First, the Graham v. Miller case is a U.S. Supreme Court case, and it said that we cannot sentence people under 24 to the death penalty. Why? Because our brain does not finish developing until we are 25. So, given that there is legal precedent on the books that state we cannot take a life, the state does not have the ability to take a life under 24 because individuals, as human beings, we do not finish developing our brain capacity until 25. It is no logical reason why we are trying to allow 18-year-olds the ability to purchase deadly weapons. I will also say, I don't believe that there is a Senate companion to this bill. So this is an exercise in futility, if you ask me. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the remainder of the time.
Thank you, Representative Gant, for yielding the remainder of your time. Leader Soroy, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We yield to the gentleman from Green Cove Springs, Representative Sapp.
Representative Sapp, you are recognized in debate.
He's a Republican.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for recognizing me on this very good bill. I don't speak today as an advocate for Second Amendment rights or as a co-sponsor of this bill, which I am. I wanted to approach this bill from a philosophical issue that I fundamentally have with the current law that this bill addresses. In America, you have a right to vote at the age of 18. In America, if you're a man, you must sign up for selective service at the age of 18, which means in America, we think you're mature enough to fight and die for this country. I philosophically believe that if you are treated as an adult to defend our country and to vote in our country, we must not infringe upon your constitutional rights. To me, this is simply a matter of consistency in how we treat 18-year-olds. I support this very, very good bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back my time.
Leader Soroy, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We yield back the balance of our time in this segment.
Leader Soroy has yielded back the balance of the time in this segment. We are in the next debate segment. Leader Gant, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gant.
I yield to Representative Escamani.
She's a Democrat.
Representative Escamani, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I first just want to say thank you to all the advocates who have come to Tallahassee on this issue over the years. And of course, organizations like Moms Demand Action, Team Enough, and others. I want you to know that your voice matters. And we're doing everything we can to hold the line on the progress that we have made while we push for more progress into the future. And so, members, it is no surprise that I rise in opposition to this legislation, lowering the age to purchase firearms in Florida from 21 to 18. But it's not just a policy discussion for me. It is a matter of public safety and also a moral responsibility as a lawmaker. This body has said, let kids be kids. But how can someone be a kid when they're in constant fear of gun violence? In their classroom, in their movie theater, in their neighborhood, at a place of worship. When I was going to public schools years ago, I remember us having to do fire drills and tornado drills, but now we have our children doing gun drills. We have our children going through lockdowns. Oftentimes these are false alarms, but the fear is there, the trauma is there, and I can only imagine what it's like to be a parent knowing that your child is now in lockdown because a child brought a gun to school, and sometimes these are guns that are at home, not locked responsibly, creating just complete fear and havoc for our kids. The age limit of 21 was put into place after one of the deadliest shootings in American history that took place right here in Florida at Marjory Stone Douglas High School. I'm sure all of us remember where we were that day. I know I do. This law was supported by Democrats and Republicans in this chamber. It was a recognition that with rights come responsibilities, and that the deadly power of a firearm must not be dealt with casually, but in contrast, needs to be placed responsibly. Now, I've heard supporters of this bill argue that if you're old enough to join the military, you're old enough to own a gun. But let's be clear, military service comes with intense training, supervision, and accountability. Buying a firearm at a gun show or a gun store or having it be given to you does not come with that same level of training or responsibility. I also want to stress that this law is indeed constitutional. The 11th Circuit just told us that. So if anyone's worried about the Second Amendment and our constitutional rights, nothing to worry about. The courts have agreed that Florida's minimum age gun law is indeed constitutional. This bill does not advance freedom. In contrast, it endangers lives. It puts more guns in the hands at a time when we're already grappling with rising youth violence and mental health crises. It's not a step forward, it's a step back into a tragic past that we vowed never to repeat. If anything, I would love for us to do more on holding parents accountable who gift their teenage children firearms on Christmas. I would love to see us do more suicide prevention, which one of the most unfortunate common losses involving a gun is in fact suicide. And of course, I love to see us do violence intervention programs to help stop a child from even considering going towards violence. Our duty here every single day in this legislature is simple. It is to protect Floridians, to support Floridians, to ensure they can reach their fullest potential. Our children can't do that if they lose their lives to a gun. This bill falls short of that duty to protect our constituents. I urge you to vote no on this bill. Let's not undo the hard-earned progress that we made after the tragedy at Parkland. Let's honor those that we lost by refusing to go backward. Please vote no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gant, debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Daley.
Representative Daley, you're recognized.
In a matter of minutes, a 19-year-old with a long gun walked into my high school, my alma mater, killed 17 and wounded 17 more. Minutes. At the time, I was on the city commission in Coral Springs. About half the student body were Coral Springs kids. Not that that matters. It's not any one community's issue. It's a national tragedy. But I was there within about 30 minutes of that shooting. I've walked the scene. I've talked to parents. You know, when you run for city commission, you think you're going to fix stop signs and potholes. You don't think you're going to hug a member of your community whose kid was just ripped apart. You don't. But that is the reality of our community. So in response, you've heard about it, there was an overwhelming bipartisan response from some names you may recall. One of them, the one that signed it into law, is now a United States Senator. Former lieutenants governor, former presiding officers of this chamber, the other chamber, speakers to be, presidents to be, and run-of-the-mill members. Bipartisan response, the most significant response to keep our kids safe in, dare I say it, 25 years. And guess what, members? It's worked. It's worked. The science doesn't lie. I know we're in an age and an era where we question science, but the science and the facts don't lie on this issue. Most school shooters are 18 to 20 with a long gun. It's facts. I didn't make it up. Also, 18 to 20-year-olds represent just 4% of the population, but account for over 17% of known gun homicide offenses. Now, we've heard it a couple times on this floor today, and I've heard it in committee. You're 18 years old, you're old enough to serve, you should be able to purchase that firearm. Thank you for stepping up to serve our country. Thank you for doing that, but let's drill down on that for just a second. In just the case of the Army, you're gonna go through an 11-week basic course. You're gonna go through a 3-week intensive marksmanship course where they don't even let you touch the firearm until week 3, phase 3 of your intensive training. You also undergo, guess what? A background check. You also undergo a mental health evaluation. Now, you wanna have a serious conversation about 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds purchasing firearms? Let's talk about background checks. Let's talk about actual training. Let's talk about mental health evaluations. If mental health is the problem, let's solve it. Because members, as you've heard here today, I'm not coming for your guns.
I am a gun owner. I am a responsible, trained gun owner, just like I think everybody has the right to be under our Constitution. But I think there are also limits. And those limits in this state have worked. What has changed? What has changed since the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Act became law? Nothing. The law has worked. It doesn't violate the Second Amendment. As you've heard today, the 11th Circuit's already said that. We have done this 3 times. This is the 3rd time that I can recall that I've stood on this floor and railed against this bill. Members, I don't speak very often. For the new members, I don't get up very often. This is the 3rd time I've stood up to rail against this bill for no reason. Over the next couple weeks, you're gonna hear your bill's no longer moving on the House side because it's not moving on the Senate side. Guess what? That's what's happening with this bill. It's not moving on the Senate side. God willing, it's not gonna move on the Senate side. And yet we do this year after year after year. We rip the wounds off of those in my community so we can stand up here and hug the flag. That's not okay. Every single time we do this, members, it reopens wounds that you cannot even begin to imagine, and I wish that it didn't, but it does. Don't vote for this bill. For so many reasons, but not the least of which, just about the same time that it took me to speak to you today, 17 people lost their lives with a 19-year-old with a long gun. Vote no.
Well, that was Democratic Representative Dan Daly opposing a bill that passed the Florida House last week. The bill would lower the minimum age to purchase a rifle or long gun to 18 years old in Florida. And it did pass the House, but as you heard, the bill is not moving in the Senate. We're going to closely follow it. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan. We're broadcasting from the studios of WMNF in Tampa. We're going to hear more of this debate now. We're going to start with Representative Vanessa Oliver. She's a Republican.
Representative Oliver, you're recognized in debate. The clerk will start the clock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I am here today to address an inconsistency in our laws which prohibits 18 to 21-year-olds from purchasing rifles while at the same time allowing them to receive those same firearms as gifts. This loophole sends a confusing message that young adults are responsible enough to own a firearm, but only if someone else buys it for them. If these individuals are trusted to own, possess, and use a rifle responsibly, they should be trusted to work through the legal process themselves, including passing background checks. By forcing them into this gift-only loophole, we are undermining accountability, encouraging backdoor workarounds, and denying young adults the dignity of exercising their rights in a lawful, transparent way. Now, I'd like you to think about what this means for real people, especially young single mothers. Imagine a 19-year-old mom with a baby at home who wants to protect herself and her family. Under current law, she cannot go into a store, pass a background check, and purchase a rifle for home defense. The law tells her she's not capable of making that decision for herself. But if a friend or family member gives her a rifle as a gift, suddenly she's deemed responsible enough to own it. This is not consistent, it is not fair, and it does not improve public safety. Instead of empowering responsible young adults, like that single mom, to legally and responsibly purchase firearms for their own protection, we force them to rely on others or leave them defenseless, all while trusting them to vote, pay taxes, sign contracts, and even serve in the military. I ask you to support this good bill. Thank you.
Representative Maggard, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recognize Alvarez D. from Hillsborough.
Representative Alvarez D., you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, sir. Members, if we could bring down the temperature just for a minute. I think it's important to note that many of the arguments from the members on the other side of the aisle can be true and can be logical and can be right, and you still vote for this bill. I have 7 children. And Representative Escamani is right. We literally do drills about what happens if a bad guy comes in and tries to hurt my 5-year-old. So, ma'am, your arguments are valid. They're right. They're impactful. But what we're asking me to do, and the members of this body, is to forego one oath in response to the emotion that I feel to protect my child. Making laws is difficult. Protecting rights are difficult. And the rights that you were born with as a human being that were gifted to you from your Creator are non-negotiable. We've enshrined those. And this isn't some rah-rah speech to make you go, here we go again. This is the reality that we took an oath for. The Constitution says you either have rights that we are protecting or we don't protect any of them at all. Imagine if I told you that some rights are worth this body protecting and some aren't, and then I ask you to vote up and down that way based on the emotion that you carry for those. We are either an adult at 18 or we're not. It's legitimately that simple. That's the basis of this argument. If you tell me that a mind is not ready or a mind is not prepared at the age of 18, then I would ask you to remove someone's right to vote. I would ask you to remove someone's right to contract. I would ask you to stop passing laws that hold 18-year-olds to be adults when their criminal activity brings them in front of the judiciary. I would ask you to not let someone get married at 18. And I would ask you that if that same mind is not ready, we should take them all off of a jury. I know it seems that it's about guns, but that's the emotional part. The legal part is the age of majority begins at 18. If this is a debate about raising it from 18 to 21, let's have the debate, but then we have to include everything else. Rights are rights. It gets messy sometimes when you start to cloud whether an adult has a right or not. Americans don't ask you for permission to exhibit their rights. What they're asking you is to continue to protect their ability to have those rights given to them by God. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Maggard in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield our time back in this block.
Representative Maggard, having yielded back the remainder of the time in this block, Representative Gant, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Harris.
Representative Harris, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise today to speak in firm opposition to House Bill 759. This bill proposes lowering the minimum age to purchase a firearm from 21 to 18. And I know that there are arguments being made about constitutional rights and personal responsibility, and I understand them. But we also have a responsibility to protect the safety and well-being of the constituents we serve. We have a responsibility to public safety. And we can't make false equivalences. We can't compare casting a ballot to holding an automatic weapon that can kill dozens of people in a record matter of time. Let me remind you, the current law raising the age to 21, it wasn't passed in a vacuum. It was a bipartisan response to unimaginable tragedy. I also remember where I was that day. I was driving my car when my daughter told me that another school had been shot up, but this time it was in Florida. Another school. It took the lives of 17 Floridians, children, at a high school. And that law that was passed in this body, it wasn't reactionary, it wasn't emotional, it was deliberative. It was based on data, expert input, and a commitment of all of those people together to do better. Republicans and Democrats committing to one another to do better for the state of Florida. And now, just a few years later, we're being asked to walk that back, to roll the dice with public safety, but nothing has changed to justify that reversal. Nothing has changed. This isn't just about rights, it is about readiness and maturity. Ask me why we don't let 18-year-olds drink. I know many of us believe in responsible gun ownership. I do. But lowering the age requirement isn't about responsible ownership. And Floridians don't want political messaging, they want leadership. And we owe it to these survivors. We owe it to the people that are fighting today to keep themselves safe to vote down on this bill. Please, I ask you, vote no.
That was Democratic Representative Rita Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Woodson.
Also a Democrat.
Woodson, you recognize in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm here to ask you a simple question, very simple. Tell me what has changed in the law that we pass in this House. We are asking today to revert to 18 years old instead of 21. We, the legislature, we came as a body and said we needed to do something. And we did something that we all were proud of. We did it to protect and minimize the risk, or to lessen the chance of someone who may not be ready or responsible enough to carry a gun. And I have to go with the scientists, because we are not scientists, we are not researchers. The research shows that younger individuals, especially those between the age of 18 to 20, they are more likely to engage in risky behaviors, including impulsivity and aggression. The American Psychological Association has highlighted that the brain continues to develop into the mid-20s. And for those of us who have children, we know that our children are not as mature as they should be, really, until they turn about 24, 25. I have them. And it's not that they're not smart, they're very smart. We want to allow kids to have access to guns at 18. We are giving them the right to purchase a gun at 18 today in this chamber, after we passed the law that was put into place after Parkland. What is different in us as a body that put this law in place then and now we are reverting it? We are all elected officials, and we are responsible to make policy to protect our community. Is this what we're doing today? We saw what happened, and we were all satisfied with the decision that we made. Do assault weapons kill? Yes, they kill. Are our children, teachers, and school personnel still in school? Yes, they are. Do our communities still need protection? Yes, our communities need protection. When I think of so many parents like Sabrina...
Well, I'm going to interrupt Democratic Representative Marie Paul Woodson in her speech on the House floor last week. She was opposing a bill that passed the Florida House. It would lower the minimum age to purchase a rifle or long gun to 18 in Florida. The bill passed the House, but it has not been taken up in the Senate. This has been WMNF's Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan. If you missed any of the show, or if you'd like to share it with a friend, I'm going to post the interview we did earlier with Dave Coleman, a demonstrator at the Tampa Tesla protest. That'll be up on WMNF.org. In this time slot tomorrow is Midpoint. Coming up next is an episode of Alternative Radio with environmental justice speech by Maria Lopez Nunez. Then coming up at noon is Wide Awake America with Nadine Smith. She speaks with Chris Geidner, who breaks down the latest legal maneuvers reshaping civil rights, from attacks on LGBTQ people to the quiet erosion of democratic norms. They're going to talk about what the courts are holding, what they're not, and how everyday acts of resistance still matter. This has been Tuesday Cafe, coming to you live on April 1st, 2025 from the studios of WMNF Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota, and Lakeland. Thanks so much for listening and supporting community radio.